Assalamu alaikum. So how was your weekend? We will be studying historical background of Pakistan, causes, failure of the War of Independence 1857, its impact on Hindu-Muslim unity, right? This is the lecture for this week. We will cover part of it in today's class and then part of it on Wednesday, inshallah, right? Well, you know, the basis of historical movement for the creation of Pakistan may be said to begin with the outbreak of the War of Independence 1857, because that was the point when the Muslims started feeling that they are a separate nation because of something which had happened in the past and something which will be happening with them after 1857, right? So that is why we trace it from 1857. Now what did it do? The War of Independence opened or started on 10th May 1857 in Meerut, a remote and small city of United Province of the subcontinent, right? India. Then, though unsuccessful, it brought many changes, particularly in the political strategies of three parties: Hindus, British and Muslims. It was an unsuccessful war. It did not achieve its objectives. You need to keep it in mind, but it had an imprint on the history of subcontinent. Though unsuccessful, but it still had to do a lot of things with the events which were to follow. Now, in order to go beyond this point, we need to understand what was War of Independence and how did it happen and what were the causes for it, right? So there were, if we want to point out some of the major causes, or if you want to group major causes of this war, it can be grouped in economic causes, administrative causes, political causes, religious causes, social causes, military causes, and then one immediate cause, right, which triggered this war. Now let's move forward. What were the economic causes of this war? Before the East India Company, EIC, I would refer to it, EIC rule, India agricultural industry and trade was flourishing. But with the arrival of the East India Company, and then when it was given permission to do trade with India, right, basically they extracted the raw material from India and they carried that raw material to Great Britain. Over there the raw material was processed, and then the refined or the processed good was again exported to India or somewhere else, and they were earning a lot of money out of it. So the raw material was purchased on very you might say like peanuts. They were purchased like peanuts, right? And the price given to the rulers of India or the Maharajas, they were not more than peanuts. And then but however the British government was earning a lot out of it, right? The British tried to exploit India for their economic gains and fulfill demands of their industrial revolution, as it was a time of industrial revolution in Great Britain. So they were in need of raw material, right? And India was a golden sparrow for them. Indian exports to Britain, that was mainly cotton, tea, spices, ended up in India as finished goods or were further exported to other countries, right? So this was what happened with the resources of India during the East India Company rule. After gaining rights to collect revenue in Bengal in 1765, the East India Company used the money raised through revenue in Bengal for fighting wars in other parts of India. Now, 1757 is the date when Siraj-ud-Dowla was defeated, right? And it gave kind of a legal sanctity to the East India Company in Bengal. And then afterwards, it was the ruler of the eastern parts of India, particularly Bengal. So then it introduced new revenue laws for the area, and revenues were collected from that area, and then that revenue was further used to expand their influence in the rest of India, right? The British used the same revenue to expand their influence in the rest of India. The policies of EIC badly affected zamindars, talukdars, right? These were the classes affected by it. Talukdars, middle income groups, traders, laborers, etc. Now talukdars, I think all of you can get the rest of the terms, but talukdars was the name of the official by the Mughals who used to collect revenue from the districts, right? That was talukdar. What were the administrative costs? So these, you can see that discontentment was created, economic discontentment was created in India because of these policies of East India Company. Now administrative causes, they did not, that was inefficient and insufficient administration was there. Inefficient means they did not have knowledge of the local people. So in this regard we can call them inefficient administration, right? And their officials were insufficient to cater to the administrative needs of the areas they were apparently controlling, right? So the machinery was not enough for that. Annexation of Indian states as part of their expansionist policies under the doctrine of lapse. Now what is the doctrine of lapse? This was another flaw in their policies. They introduced a doctrine, like for example, if there is a Maharaja or if there is a Maharani and they do not have a legal heir to the throne, right? They have got some adopted son or adopted, let's say, daughter. So after the demise of that Maharaja or Maharani, right, the adopted son would not be supposed to become the ruler of that particular state. So they had done an assessment, and there were many states in which this case was prevailing. So that is why this doctrine of lapse was actually meant to to promote their expansionist policies in India in the long term. That was another administrative flaw. Most of the Maharajas or their adopted sons then revolted after the demise of their parents, those who had adopted them. So it was kind of one of the causes of this.
Then what did this law say?
It says that that area would be annexed, or it would become part of the East India Company. Administrative rule of East India Company would be established over there, right? All high posts, civil, military, were given to Europeans rather than locals. It was another problem. The locals were not satisfied with these laws. The Europeans or the Britishers, they would come and they would be installed as officers, civil and military officers, and the locals would just serve, like they would just do odd or menial jobs. So they were not satisfied. The unjust and exploitative revenue policies. Now, when, as in the previous slide, when I told you that they had levied their own revenue laws, right? So due to those laws, they were collecting revenue. The amount of the revenue they used to collect was not justified, so they were exploiting the local people. And you need to keep it in mind that it was a norm in Europe at that time that the revenue would be collected in an unjustified manner. It was the norm in all of the European countries, those who were involved in the colonial expansions particularly. Then political causes. One of the causes was the expansionist policies of Great Britain, right? They were expanding in India. They had secured the eastern Indian areas, and now they were expanding towards the western India and towards the north, right? Order of Lord Canning's, the Mughal, this was another order. The Lord Canning's, he was the last Governor General and the first Viceroy. So the Mughal emperor to leave Red Fort Delhi and stay at Qutb Minar Delhi. So it was that was Bahadur Shah Zafar. So he ordered him to leave Qutb Minar, Red Fort, and then be stationed at Qutb Minar. Red Fort was the seat of capital. It was a palace, right, for to govern the affairs of India, you might call. So he was ordered, it was derogatory for him and for the people of India. They did not accept this thing with openly, they did not accept it, right, wholeheartedly. Then again, the Mughal rule will come to an end after the demise of Bahadur Shah Zafar. This is again, an order passed by him that whenever this last ruler dies, the Mughal rule will come to an end and all the property of the Mughal ruler will be snatched away, right? It will not pass on to the successors. So then it was another political cause that the people were not happy with it. Social and religious causes, what were they? Before 1813, Christian missionaries were not allowed to come to India, but in 1813 it was decided that they should come to India and preach Christianity, right? The local people did not approve of this thing. They were not positive about this happening or this development. Then Religious Disability Act announced many incentives for those Indians who would convert to Christianity, right, like promotion, early promotions and this and that. So this act was introduced and again the local people resented it. Then reforms in Hindu customs were made by law, however they were considered as distortion of teachings of Hinduism. Particularly, the burning of wife on the pyre of her husband, the funeral pyre of her husband. That is an inhuman thing if we see from our perspective. But the problem with that was that it was a custom, it was a religious custom. So the Hindus particularly, they did not approve of it. They thought of it as meddling in their religious affairs by the British India rulers, right? So it was another problem for them. It was widely believed after 1813 that the actual mandate of East India Company was to convert Indians, especially Hindus, to Christianity. So the Hindus were not happy with that, and you might see that there are a lot of Christians living in India, particularly in the eastern parts of India, and that was the region from where these missionaries started working, right? Military causes, what were these military causes which created discontentment amongst the people of India and finally paved the way for the revolts in 1857? So, great disparity in the salaries between Indian and European soldiers, right? So the person of the same ranks would not get enough or equal to the person of the same rank coming from Europe, right? An Indian of the same rank would not get the same salary as a European of the same rank in the same army, in the same unit, right? Sepoys were sent to distant overseas part of empire but were not given extra salaries. Now it was an empire, right? India was part of it. India was just one part of that empire, and they just started recruitment, and then wherever they used to send their military expeditions, they would send troops from all over that empire to other places. So Indian sepoys, they were sent to many other overseas areas under the control of Great Britain, but extra salaries were not given to them for that service, right? So it was another problem. Then Indian sepoys were treated with contempt by their English officers. They were not looked upon in good manner. So again, Indian sepoys were refused promotion in services as like their English counterparts. Out of such discontent, the Indian sepoys led to mutiny, right? The General Service Enlistment Act 1856 by Lord Canning for the soldiers from Bengal to be recruited and posted wherever the empire needed them was greatly resented. The thing was that some of the Hindus, they considered travel by sea out of India would make them non-Hindu. They would not remain Hindu if they travel by sea out of India. However, this thing, it compelled them to, when they are recruited, they would be compelled to go outside the country, and then it was against their religious beliefs. So it was another military cause that soldiers in the British Indian Army, they were not happy with this development. Well, this was the background. It was happening, it happened over the span of, you might say, more than 100 years, right? And these things were happening. But then, what was the immediate cause? What was the point which triggered this war of...
The cartridges used in the war.
Exactly. The cartridges, you know, that's good. The cartridges in Enfield rifles, they were introduced, and then the cartridges were introduced, and these bullets, they were covered with a grease paper, and it was, a rumor was spread that this grease paper, the grease of the paper is made of the fats of pig and cow. Now the problem with this is that Muslims have a problem with pig and the Hindus have a problem with cow, right? And in order to fire that, they need to pull the paper with their mouth, with their teeth, right? So it was a problem for them. So both of them, they were not happy. Muslims and the Hindus, the dominant communities in India, they were not happy with it, with this development, and they revolted. The mutiny was suppressed and the British government officially took over the rule of India from East India Company in 1858. Previously, India was under the rule of East India Company, and after that, it directly came under the rule of the British government, right? A Secretary of State for India was nominated by the Parliament, and he was, you know, so it was run like an entity of the British government or part of the British government, not that of East India Company. So this was the War of Independence, a brief summary of causes and failures. Why did it fail? Not failure, but the causes. Now, why did it fail? This was fought with, you know, a lot of enthusiasm by each and every participant who was fighting against the British in this war. But why did this war or this revolt fail? This is another issue of debate. We need to ponder over it, right? So the Indians were lacking a definite aim. They were lacking a definite aim in this war. Everybody had his or her own objectives, and they did not fight for a single cause, right? Like, for example, the Maharani of Jhansi, she fought for her state, right? Or that of Faizabad, the ruler of the Maulvi of Faizabad, he fought for his own particular interest. The united front was not there in front of them. So that was one of the problems, one of the causes that this mutiny failed. It did not give the desired results, right? Every group and faction fought for personal reasons without a central Indian command. There was no central Indian army fighting against the British army or the East Indian army. So this was again a problem. Some had problem with job insecurity, so they were fighting for it. Some had problems with high taxes, so they were fighting against it. While others were concerned preserving their rule in the states, so they were fighting only for their states, right? So that was the reason. It was a series of mutinies, but it did not succeed. The lack of unity was visible in it, right? Then revolt was not pre-decided. It could not start at one time in the whole of India, therefore EIC effectively crushed it. Whenever a revolt used to arise or a revolt used to occur, the East India Company would dispatch troops over there to suppress it. And at the same time, they would not find any difficulty on other fronts to focus on that, you know. So the army was thick in order to suppress it. The Indian uprisings were not making the East Indian army thin. You know, thin army becomes finds it very difficult for itself to suppress something like that. But it was provided enough chance to go there and then crush that revolt, and whenever then there would be another revolt and they would go again en bloc and they would crush that. So it was another problem in that. Then there was lack of public support for it, you know. So educated groups, mainly new converts to Christianity, this group, new converts to Christianity, they were not supporting it. Then many traders who were benefiting from the rule of the East India Company, they were not supporting this war. Then though many peasants did support this war, but there were many peasants who were taking benefits from this rule, and they were not supporting this war of independence or mutinies or series of mutinies against the East India Company. It was another cause, lack of national spirit, right? Like for example, Lucknow fought alone, Jhansi fought alone, Bihar just fought alone, you know. They were fighting, you know, to safeguard their rules. The rulers were fighting over there to safeguard their own rules. Narrow interest rather than safeguarding the larger interest of India was one of the major causes that it could not succeed. No efficient war tactics were there. The Mughal rulers and other local rulers had quite weak armies which had no match for the English officers and their war tactics. This was another, because that was an imperial power and it was fighting all over the world, and it had conquered more than half of the world. And here in India, they were faced with a very weak enemy. They did not know anything about the modern warfare techniques. Their officers were trained, while the officers of the rulers or the Mughal emperors, they were not that much trained. So they could not pose some kind of a serious threat to them. Okay. The efficient English officials were able to suppress the mutiny in 1857, right? So now let's come to the main point, which is the relevance of this thing with the unity of Muslims and Hindus in the subcontinent. First of all, as we have studied, this was not a religious war. It had many other causes as well, right? It was economic and socio-cultural, you might call it, right? But it was blamed by Hindus to be the act of the Muslims alone as religious conspiracy against the British. This was the main tactics of Hindus, that they were blaming it on Muslims. When it was suppressed, or when the mutiny was suppressed, then they just convinced the British that, see, it is the doings of the Muslims. It has nothing to do with the Hindus, because we were already ruled by them. Now it doesn't make any difference if you are ruling us, right? But they were the one losing much with your authority, with your rule. So that is why you should think logically that it was the act of the Muslims alone. They instigated us, and we did not do anything against you in this revolt or in this war, right? With this, Sir Syed Ahmad Khan came to the forefront. This was the time, or these were the challenges which gave rise to Sir Syed Ahmad Khan in these challenges, right? What happened is that language is something which is binding us together, right? So because it is necessary for our interaction with each other. That is why it is something which is in the foundation of a society, or which is the fabric of a society, language. Whatever language is that, but language is something which is considered as a foundation of a society or of a group, a social group. It may lead to disintegration in societies with cultural diversities. If you are just imposing one language on the whole of community which has got cultural diversity, it might disintegrate that community, right? It might not perform the task of unifying them. Rather, it will do something opposite to that. What happened was that, now this is the Hindi-Urdu controversy. After the War of Independence, what happened with Urdu, right? So first of all, Urdu was a language born in India, right? It was not imported from anywhere else. It was something which was created in India, and naturally created, not manufactured like, right? It evolved in India. India was considered to be a golden sparrow in the terms of fertile land, as I have already told you. So that is why many occupiers or many invaders used to come. Before the British, they were Arabians, they were Persians, you know, they were Turks, and they were coming and they were occupying India. So with their invasions, they would stay over here in India, and with that thing, you know, they would speak with the local people, and at times they would introduce their terminologies, their words, and with the passage of time, this language was created, right? Language, they also brought their language with them over here. So who were these people? Arabs, Persian, Turks, you know, when they were mingling with the local people. So this mingling or intermingling, you know, it gave rise, or it created Hindi, and it was, as in Urdu we say, Lashkari Zaban. This is the language of troops. The troops of these people, they would communicate with each other in this language, this common language which they could understand, and even the local people could understand. So that was a common language, and that is why it is called the language of the troops. This is the meaning of Urdu. Since it was formed by the invaders of the Muslim world and emerged during the rule of the Mughals India, it was termed as the language of the Musalman, and initially it was called Musalmani. Right? So the Hindus of the subcontinent, they did not accept it as their own language. They were considering it as the language of the Muslims. That is why, or that was why they were calling it Musalmani. So you can see that there was a bias in their attitude even at that time when this language was created, right? But the problem with this is that not only the Muslims spoke this language, but other communities, almost all the communities living in India, they were speaking this language, and they contributed a lot to the development of this language. So it wasn't only the Muslims, the local people also contributed to the development of this language. This is a historical fact, right? A large number of literary works appeared in this language, in Urdu, right? And the regions which you know, primarily spoke this region was the Deccan, the Lucknow, Mysore and Delhi, right? So in these regions this language was mainly spoken, and then later on it was spread to the rest of India, the Indian subcontinent. Now if you go to Nepal, if you go to Myanmar, if you go to Bangladesh, you might find people that they are speaking Urdu as we are speaking it over here in Pakistan.
Do people speak it in India?
Yeah, of course. People do speak it in India, and you might find a lot of even TV channels specifically broadcasting in Urdu from India, not Hindi, in proper Urdu.
Big literary Urdu conferences also take place in India.
Yeah, because it is the land where this language was born. So that is why Lucknow was the place, right? So that is why this refined Urdu, you need to speak to someone from India in living in these regions, right, in these areas, and you will find, particularly Lucknow, you will find that their language, their accent, that is proper. And if you observe those people who have migrated from India to Pakistan, you just go and talk to them, speak to them, and you will find the refined accent of Urdu in them. They speak really fine Urdu. We Punjabis, Pathan, Balochis, we do not have the same kind of accent, but they do have this accent. You just go to Karachi and you just listen to them, right? So this accent is there, and it is from India, right? In 1837, Persian was replaced with Urdu as the court and the state language. No one objected at that time when it was replaced in 1837 with Persian, right? With Urdu, when Persian was replaced with Urdu. No one, even the Hindus, they did not object to it. Now, but after 1857 and the War of Independence in 1867, the War of Independence 1857, but the controversy started in 1867, right? So they just now, after the fall of the empire, this language was looked upon as the language of the invaders, and the invaders are no more there for the Hindus. So that is why they thought of, rolling back this language. British, on the other hand, in their disregard for the Muslim, adopted the same attitude. They were not happy with the Muslims' approach towards them because they thought that they were in power and they are the ones who can pose challenge to us, to our authority in India. They were not feeling threatened by the Hindus. So they thought that in order to get rid of Muslims, we need to target their language. Whatever they are speaking, whatever they were speaking initially, we need to target this thing, right? So they started targeting Urdu like the Hindus were doing it. In order to get rid of this language, right, the Hindus and the Britishers, they both started their efforts. What happened? Main opponents of Urdu in India: Raja Ram Mohan Roy, Raja Shiv Prasad, Lakshman Singh, Haresh Chandan, and Binkum Chatterjee, right? So these are some of the opponents of these were some of the opponents at that time who were opposing Urdu, and they were the proponents of introduction of Hindi in the Devanagari script. Like Urdu was in the script of it was in Persian script, which was resembling to Arabian script, right, to Arabic script. So they were not in favor of this, and they thought of a Devanagari script and Hindi. The first effort was made at the start of the 19th century when a new language, so this new language Hindi was introduced at the start of the 19th century. But it could not, it could not make its ground, and it could not do well at that time. In 1809, Prem Sagar was written. It was a Hindi novel. It was written in 1809, but since it was not a full-fledged effort, soon the language went into oblivion. So this language could not do anything good. This, the first Hindi novel was written, but literary work was still scarce in Hindi.
Can we say that Hindi emerged from Urdu? Because both languages are...
You can say, but the Devanagari script is basically, you cannot say particularly that it emerged from Urdu. There are a lot of words, the grammar is the same, but then a lot of words from Sanskrit, they are there in Hindi, and we do not understand. If you listen to someone speaking pure Hindi, not a mixture of Hindi and Urdu, you won't be able to get anything out of it. Apart from just ka, ke, ki, something like that, you won't be able to get anything because the vocabulary is in Sanskrit, and the wordings are quite different from that of Urdu. So it has some influence of Urdu, you might say, but mainly it is quite difficult to understand Hindi when it is spoken in its pure term, right? So, but the problem was that after independence, the British Crown's wrath, fell upon the Muslim. So that was, Muslims became the victim, and their language became a victim of it, this wrath. So that is why the Muslims could not do anything with this, and the Hindus tried to get rid of Urdu with the help of the British, right? They just were trying to convey to the British that they were the loyal servants, the loyal slaves, and the Muslims were not the loyal ones in India, right? So they were trying to get close to the ruler, as they previously were closer to the Mughals, right? So they did not, the Hindus did not have their own rule kind of thing. They did not have the capacity to rule their affairs by themselves. They used to get close to whoever the ruler is in that area at that particular time, right? Well, this is kind of related to history, so that is why we need to go through it. The combined organized effort started in the second half of the 19th century. As I have already told you that in 1867, the Hindus of Banaras presented a request to the government regarding the replacement of Urdu with Hindi and its Persian script with Devanagari script. I have already explained this, right? So when you write something like, may, right? Forgive me for my writing. And if you write, for example, the same may like this, hanging from something like this, you cannot understand it, So this is basically what they were doing. The word might be the same, it might sound the same, but the problem is that you cannot read it, right? So Devanagari script did the same too. It was easy for Hindus to read, but it was almost impossible for the Muslims to read it, because the Muslims were not trained in it, and this language was not that popular. As I have already told you, we have already discussed that a novel was written, but it wasn't a full-fledged effort, so the language could not flourish. So that is why the Muslims were not used to this thing, and they were not understanding it. And the problem with that was that if you introduce Hindi in place of Urdu and replace the script with Devanagari script, then, and you are asking the government, it means that you are making it an official language, and all the correspondence of the government would be in that language. And then the Muslims working in the government offices in any capacity, they would not be able to understand it, to read it, to write it, and they would be out of jobs, right? So this was another issue with that. Sir Syed Ahmad Khan at that demand remarked that when even the language of a nation, now this is, you can see that, this is something referring to the two-nation theory now, after 1867. Before that, nobody even thought of that. But now, Sir Syed Ahmad Khan was telling, though he was an advocate of the Hindu-Muslim unity, he did not think of this thing. He was thinking that, Hindus and Muslims, they can live together in India, and they can manage their affairs. But after this thing, he came to know, and then he openly expressed his opinion that when the language of a nation is not safe, how can they live together with that particular nation, with that other nation who is giving threats to nation A, which was Muslims, right? Sir Syed, who was in fact a great advocate of the unity, prior to that incident started focusing on the cause of the Muslims alone, right? And he was not fighting the cause of the Hindus at that time, right? Like now the focus for his attention was only Muslims or this community after this Hindi-Urdu controversy started. His Scientific Society Gazette presented articles on the importance of Urdu so that people can get awareness about why this language is important, and he was spreading this kind of awareness through his writings, right? Then similarly, some Muslim newspapers like Nur al-Absar, Banaras Gazette also took the responsibility to safeguard their language. So these newspapers, mainly Muslim newspapers, and the Muslim journals and magazines, they were trying to spread awareness among the people in the common masses, that this language is very important for them, and Urdu should stay where it is right now, right? The anti-Urdu process continued when in 1871 the governor of Bengal, G. Campbell, banned Urdu in the province at all levels, right? Courts, administration, and even schools. This language was banned. Then this boosted the Hindus in other regions like NWFP, Punjab, Bihar, Sindh, Oudh to counter Urdu, because the governor of one province had banned Urdu in his province. So Hindus in other regions, the controversy was there. As we have seen, it started in 1867 and now we are in 1871. We saw this ban. So they just were encouraged by this development, Hindus in these regions, NWFP, Punjab, Bihar, Sindh and Oudh, and they started their own movements against Urdu, right? And they were trying to replace it in their regions with Hindi as well. Meetings were held of Hindus in which thousands of them signed memorials supporting the cause of elimination of Urdu all over India. So these things were happening, and it was the environment, it was the kind of situation in which the Muslim started thinking about themselves as someone separate from the other community, the dominant community, which was Hindus, right? So the circumstances became even more hard for the Muslims and their language when Anthony MacDonald became the governor of the UP in 1900. He was a pro-Hindu and thus anti-Muslim, right? What happened? Sir Syed Ahmad Khan has passed away in 1898, sorry. So what happened at that time? He dismissed Urdu as the official language of UP, which was in fact considered to be the home of Urdu language. Lucknow is there, Uttar Pradesh, right? Lucknow is there, so he dismissed that language from that particular province. Now it was a problem. He issued orders and declared Hindi to be the official language of the province. Sir Syed's successor at Aligarh, mainly Nawab Mohsin al-Mulk, the secretary of Aligarh Trust, took action against the MacDonald's Act, right? So Sir Syed was not there, but whatever his educational services were at that time, they just, you know, they were for the benefit of the Muslims, and now the graduates of that AO college or Muslim Aligarh University, the graduates and the trust and, you know, all the companions or the followers of Syed Ahmad Khan who were following him at that time, now they took the charge of these things, and they posed some serious threat, or they posed or they agitated against this MacDonald Act. Nawab Mohsin al-Mulk, he called for popular gathering of the supporters of Urdu at Aligarh and openly condemned governor's work, right? Governor's work. Again, what happened that he also founded Urdu Defense Association, and it was decided that the association would take action against the doings of the governor. So another association was found on these foundations that it should safeguard the it should safeguard Urdu, right, against the British oppression or against these acts through which they were trying to make it irrelevant. The result of this Muslim response was that Urdu too, along with the Hindi, was declared the official language of the province. Now Hindi was the official, they had declared Hindi as official language. But then after this series of agitations, they declared Urdu as well as the official language of the province, right? So it was kind of a success for the Muslims, right? But Mohsin al-Mulk, he was not happy with this, right? He was not satisfied with this outcome, and he continued his struggle. He wanted to give Urdu the same status as it had previously, right? When UP got rid of MacDonald, he founded another association named as Anjuman-e Urdu, right? To counter all future attempts of the Hindus and the English against the language, right? Now, if you see, that was just a brief overview of what happened with Urdu and how this language was preserved, and how did the Muslim fight for the preservation of this language. It was just a brief overview, but we can see the love of Muslim for this language, and that was the reason, and that is still the reason, that though only 7 or 8% people in Pakistan, they are native Urdu speakers, but still this is the official language of Pakistan. That Pakistan was created because of the two-nation theory, you know, and the foundation of the two-nation theory, we can see it in 1867, that it was a controversy of Hindi-Urdu, right? So the founders of Pakistan, they just implemented, or they adopted this language as the official language of Pakistan, and you would see in the constitutional history of Pakistan, when we will reach there, that there were a lot of debates by people who were making the constitution, then which language should be the official language of Pakistan. but then it prevailed. The Urdu prevailed, right? Okay, it was the Hindi-Urdu controversy. We are done with it, right? We can, you can just go through this controversy in detail, in quite detail. A lot of literature is written on it, right? So you can read it. But then what happened? The formation of Indian National Congress in 1885. That was one aspect, right? Like that was the aftermath of the War of Independence. So in the aftermath of the War of Independence, another development happened, and that was the formation of the Indian National Congress. It was founded on 28th December 1885. We see Banerjee was selected as the leader of the Congress, right? This is the picture of the first National Congress. If I can, no, I cannot do that, right? But you can see it, you know. So this is the original picture of the Indian National Congress at that time when the first meeting was held, right? Okay, what was the objective of the Congress, or what were the objectives of the Indian National Congress? Why did it develop, or why was it created, right? So one of the primary objectives of the Indian National Congress was, you know, to create fusion into one national whole among the different factions of society. They wanted to create one nation out of the different factions or different communities living in India. This was one of the objectives of Indian National Congress, because they also felt that, you know, there is discontentment among the different sections, and they are not considering themselves as part of one larger community. So this was one thing, you know, that they wanted to create unity among the Indians. Then the gradual regeneration of Indians along all lines, mental, moral and social and political. So they wanted to create a fabric of society and to regenerate a society on these lines, right? Social, political, mental, moral lines, right? This was another objective, one of the objectives. The consolidation of the union between England and India, another objective, right? So that the interest of India should be taken care of, and those acts of the British government which are detrimental to the Indian community, they should be rectified, right? Yeah?
So I don't understand the second point.
The second point, it was, you know, everybody was on another planet. Moral planet was changed, the moral planet of Muslims was changed from that of Hindus. Socially, they were not considering themselves as part of one community. The social order of Hindus was changed from the social order of the Muslims, right? Political considerations were changed. The Muslims were trying to have their own say in political terms. The Hindus were trying to have their own say. So they were trying to create kind of a unity to regenerate the whole society on these lines, so that everybody can think that they are Indians and they should take care of not the Hindus or the Muslim interest, but the Indian interest, or the Indian the national interest of India, right? You might call it. So are we done with this point? So they were trying to impress upon the British government that whatever acts which are considered detrimental to the interest of India, they should not be carried out, right? So this was another objective of the Indian National Congress. But there is a very, normally you might have heard people, they normally say that Muslim League was created by the rulers of British India because they were feeling threatened by the popularity of Indian National Congress, and they tried to divide the Indians on the Muslims and Hindu lines. You might have heard this thing, right? This kind of propaganda prevails. They think that Muslim League is the creation of English people, and those who were the founders of Muslim League at that time, they were good friends of the English, and All India National Congress was a national political party, national level political party, and it was posing great threat to the rule of Great Britain, and that is why Muslim League was created, so that the political opposition is divided. This is what normally we think, right? Not we think, but most of the people, they think that this is what happened, right? Now this is a very interesting fact about the creation of the Indian National Congress, right? It was founded by A.O. Hume, right? An English retired civil servant, government official. Lord Dufferin, the Governor General of India, the blessing of the Governor General of India was there with this Englishman, right? So you can see that when Hume took the scheme to the Governor General, they later amended it and gave his blessing on the condition. Now when he thought of creating a political party for Indians, he went to the Governor General and he presented his scheme, and the Governor General amended the schemes and then gave his blessing to Hume. And what did he say at that time? You know, this is part of history. What did the Governor General say at that time? You know, this was the condition. His name in this connection with the scheme of the Congress should not be divulged, so as long he remained in the country, and his condition was faithfully maintained, and none but the men consulted by Mr. Hume knew anything about the matter. And who says this? Banerjee, the first leader of Congress. He says this, right? That the Governor General told A.O. Hume that, okay, you should create a party, but my name should not be disclosed as long as I remain in India, right? And yes, go ahead with the creation of this party, this political agitation. Because after the mutiny, you might see that 1857 and 1885, this is roughly about 25 years, I guess, right? So 25 or 26 years, I guess. So during this time, they were facing a lot of challenges, and they just tried to streamline all the opposition in the form of political, to give them a political voice, rather than allowing them to be agitating here and there all the time. So that was the scheme for the creation of All India National Congress at that time, and the blessing of the British government was there. So by highlighting this thing and talking about it in detail, all I mean to say is that, you know, if somebody is blaming the British that they have created Muslim League just to divide the public opinion or to divide the opposition to their crown in India, you can see that they created the All India National Congress. They did not create, an Englishman did not create the All India Muslim League, right? It was an Englishman who created the All India National Congress. So with the same argument, we can tell them that, see, the All India National Congress is your creation, or the creation of the English, not All India Muslim League, because we will later on we will discuss that how did it create, right? Okay. What was the opinion of Sir Syed Ahmad Khan about the All India National Congress, because he was still alive when this party was created? He asked the Muslim not to join this Congress, right? The reasons are quite obvious. The advice was followed by a vast majority of the Muslims, of people. This advice was followed by a vast majority, right? The reasons, there were many reasons, but one of the reasons was that he was skeptical about the role of All India National Congress, because he thought that they would safeguard the interests of Hindus and they would not safeguard the interests of the Muslims. So that is why he asked the Muslim not to join them. Secondly, he thought of the Muslim community as politically immature community by that time. So he thought that they might easily be deceived by the Hindus on the platform of the National Congress, because the Muslims were politically immature, and the Hindus, by getting closer to the English people, they have quite matured politically, and they would deceive Muslims on their platform, and then the Muslim would not be able to gain their objectives out of this political platform, right? Okay. He was of the opinion that, now this is a very powerful statement, right? That if even the Viceroy, the Secretary of State, and the whole House of Commons, the House of Commons is their parliament in England, if they had openly supported Congress, Sir Said would still remain firmly opposed to it, right? So he was of that opinion that even if everybody follows or openly supports Congress, Sir Said will be opposing it, right? Because he thought that it was not in the interest of Muslim, it was just serving the Hindu purpose, right? Now he was quoted in the Times on 12th November 1888. Sir Said was quoted like this: "It is my deliberate belief that should the resolution of the Native Congress be carried out into effect, it would be impossible for the British government to preserve peace or control in any degree the violence and the civil wars which would ensue." Right? So he was against the Indian National Congress. He impressed upon the Muslims not to join this Congress because of the reasons which I have numbered over here, right? What was the stance of the contemporary Muslim press at that time about the Congress? It was full of criticism of the Congress, right? All of the Muslim press, it was not approving Congress, and it was skeptical about the role of Congress, right? It was criticizing that it would just serve the the Hindu interest and not that of the Muslims of India. Some of the names of the newspapers or the Muslim press was that Mohammedan Observer, the Victoria paper, the Muslim Herald, right? The Rafiq-e-Hind and the Imperial paper spoke with one voice against the Congress, right? So this was the Muslim press which was opposing this Congress, and the grounds I have already discussed, that these are the grounds that on which it was opposed. Up till now, do you people have any question about it? Or is it all clear? It means that I'm teaching well, right? That all of you are quite clear about it. Okay. Okay, the Muslim organizations and institutions, what did they say about the Congress? Central National Muhammadan Association, Muhammadan Literary Society of Bengal, these are some of the associations and organizations. They were existing at that time in India. The Anjuman-e-Islam of Madras, the Dindigal Anjuman, right? And the Muhammadan Central Association of the Punjab asked the Muslims of India not to join Congress, as they thought it would never serve the interests of Muslims of India. So this was the overall attitude, the overall approach of the Muslim press, the Muslim leaders at that time, and the Muslim organizations and associations about the All India National Congress, because everybody knew, that it will not give the desired results for the Muslims, right? Now you just count these things. What happened? The War of Independence. Why did it happen? Right? What were the causes of the War of Independence? Why did it fail? We enumerated these things. Then what was the effect of the War of Independence on the Hindu-Muslim unity? So the first impact or the first effect on the Hindu-Muslim unity was that the Hindu tried to get close to the British government, and they tried to subdue Muslims through the British, right? And the first attack was made on the language of the Muslims, right? So how can you see unity when these things are happening, right? So that was the first attack. After that, another thing, they made their own political organization or political party to raise their voice, or to raise a single voice, right? So the Muslims were quite skeptical about it. So unity, you cannot see any kind of unity in that between the two communities, among the two communities. No unity is there, right? These are two incidents. After the War of Independence, we have seen these two incidents, right? Now, what happened? What was the third important incident which widened the rift between the two communities, right? That was the Partition of Bengal. Now we will just go through it. I will try to make you people understand it in detail, right? But you need to keep it in mind that it was Bengal was one of the largest provinces of India and more densely populated provinces of India, right? So in 1905, the province of Bengal and Assam were reconstituted so as to form two provinces of a manageable size. It wasn't of a manageable size. The British government was finding it difficult to administer the province, and that is why they reconstituted these provinces, these two provinces, right? So after the reconstitution, what was the population? The population of Bengal, which is the West Bengal, 42 million Hindus and 9 million Muslims, right? And the population of East Bengal was 18 million Muslim and 12 million Hindus. So the Muslims in this province, West Bengal, were in minority, right? Majority is again with M, but you should keep it in mind that they were over here, they were with majority, right, in the East Bengal. Now the scheme was sent to London in February 1905. The province of East Bengal and Assam officially came into being on 16th October 1905, right? So in February they just sent the scheme for approval to London, and it was approved and then implemented, and so so then this thing came into being, right? East and West Bengal, you can say it came into being. What was the Hindu reaction for this? This was again an issue, a problematic issue for the Hindu-Muslim unity. You can see it in the form of the Hindu reaction and in the form of the Muslim reaction, right? As I have already told you, that this whole plan was nothing but a readjustment of administrative boundaries. However, the Hindus resented it. They were not approving it. They thought that it was a kind of enmity with their community in Bengal. The partition resulted in the creation of the Muslim majority province, as I have already told you, that 18 million Muslims in the eastern Bengal. So it was resulted in the creation of the Muslim majority province. It could not be digested by the Hindus, right? It was distasteful for them. That how come a community become dominant in this part of Bengal, and another community which was previously part of the dominant community in the United Bengal is now a minority in that province, right? So it was problematic, or it could not be digested by them. Hindus regarded this partition as an attempt to strangle nationalism in Bengal. They thought that with the creation of the All India National Congress, nationalism was on the rise, and Bengal was on the forefront of that nationalism. So they thought that the partition of Bengal, that was their stance, that the partition of Bengal is basically an attempt to crush the nationalism, the aspirations of nationalism among the Hindus, among the Indians particularly, right? So that was one of their stances. Then agitation against the partition included mass meetings by the Hindus. Rural unrest also occurred. Swadeshi native movement was started to boycott the import of the British goods. British was earning from it. Industries were there, and the raw material was being exported from India to British, and then refined goods used to be imported to India from Britain. So this Swadeshi movement, it targeted the British imports so that they can be the economic strangulation of the British Empire can be done, and so they can be made compelled so to revoke or to wind up this decision, to roll back this decision. What was the Muslim reaction? 7 days after the partition, on October 22nd, 1905, a large Muslim meeting at Dhaka appreciated the boon conferred on the people by this change. The Muslims were getting benefits out of it, and they were appreciating this thing, right? Then again, 2 days after this, another huge gathering of the Muslims offered thanks to God for the partition and declared that under the new scheme, what did they declare? The Manchester Guardian is saying it, on 27th October and 23rd October 1905. These are some of the headlines or some of the wordings of the Manchester Guardian. The Muslims would be spared many oppressions which they hitherto had to endure from the Hindus. The Hindus' agitation against the partition was condemned. So the Muslims were very happy, very enthusiastic for the partition because they were gaining from it, and they were aware of the Hindu agitations. So that is why they condemned the Hindu agitations at that time, that because they knew that this agitation would give a negative signal to the British government, and the British government might reconsider their decision. So they were stopping, they were kind of trying to play an active political role, right? Okay. What happened in this is a long story, right? In the meantime, the Muslim League was also created and a lot of things happened, but what happened that due to this continuous agitation by the Hindus over the span of many years, almost 6 years, right? The East and West Bengal were reunited, right? This is what we call the annulment of the partition of Bengal, right? So that previous decision which was made in 1905, that was annulled, right? The aim was to combine appeasement to the Bengali sentiment with administrative convenience. They just try to appease these sentiments, of particularly the Hindu sentiments, so that administration of the province should become easy for them, right? The end was achieved, but that was a very short-lived end, and it was this agitation, though one community accepted it, the Hindus, previously the Muslims were happy with the partition. As a result of the Hindu agitation, the partition was annulled. Now the Hindus are happy, but the Muslims are not happy, so another community has started agitating against the British rule, right, against the British government. This agitation and this resentment remained there for the rest of the history of the United India, right? It was there till the creation of Pakistan, and then we saw that with the creation of Pakistan, the same Bengal was again divided into East Pakistan, which is now Bangladesh, and West Bengal, right? So, and even that partition was quite violent. The effects of that partition, they were quite violent even at that time. So the issue of Bengal was never a piece of cake for Great Britain. It was very problematic for Great Britain, right?